Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's device management interface call. Thanks for joining. This is a one-off that we're having because last time we did not get to some of the elements that we wanted to. So I'm just gonna go through what we have. I did not really put this in here. Who added it? No, actually, I do remember what this is. Okay, so this came up in a review where we were discussing, based on the BBSIM implementation, which we'll talk about later, we were discussing that when an update revert to the standby image or to the previous image would happen, we were wondering if it would make sense to have a state explicitly defining that the rollback happened and it was completed. Because at the moment, what we have is that, and Amit implemented into the device management interface on BBSIM, is that we have an activation complete. Basically, whenever the rollback happens, you get an activation complete event. I was just wondering if it would make sense to add a revert complete event. That would mean that something went wrong during the update and you had to revert back, and effectively you have the older image active again. Am I making sense?
Yes, Andre.
What are you guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, right? So revert to standby basically means that you use the image that is there in the standby, right? So right now the activation complete basically means that the image that was there in the standby has now been activated.
Yep.
So yes, we could create it, but I don't, as in I don't see it to be a very high priority right now.
Okay.
The change is not big, agreed. Well, as in from the interface perspective, we just have to add one more enum value, right? But the implementation, I think Holger is not yet implemented revert to standby, right?
I have it implemented.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
Yeah, but it's basically I'm just I'm just doing the same as for activate. So currently you see the same answers, so the same events coming back. So from our point of view, there is no really a difference between those two. So that's why I just reuse it, and that's why I push the same events or send the same events, but I could change the events as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't sound that complicated.
Yeah. So yeah. So Andre, so if we want, we could have a new enum being introduced there, but yeah, from an understanding perspective, it might make things a little bit more clearer. But from an implementation perspective, I don't think anything would really change. As in from a behavior perspective, sorry, not implementation perspective.
Agreed. I mean, I'm not, it was just an idea that came by when reviewing your patch. I'm not like attached to it at all. We can say no, and I'm fine with that. So your suggestion would be to skip it for now.
I think let's keep it as we start really using these APIs, right? Maybe we have more feedback, and then we could really enhance them.
Okay, so let me actually shuffle the points around. So thanks to Amit, we actually did implement DMI on BBSIM, and actually if you go on GitHub, you can actually see, you can actually see this in the upstream, and was the patch to actually have it in the Helm chart was also merged. And as part of the docs, Amit included this documentation on how to use it. Amit, do you want to say something about the implementation? Or?
Yeah, I could speak a little bit. So, yeah, we did implement some of this, as in we implemented all the gRPC services, but we put in real implementation only for the hardware management service, and something for the software management service to return some values. For most of the others, you would get an unimplemented error back. So yeah, and so this feature is enabled by default on the BBSIM. When you start up BBSIM, it runs on a different port of 50075. We just picked a number, right? And yeah, here we have some examples, right? And we used gRPC curl to test it, right? And some examples on some of the APIs that do work. So you could start managing the device, and then it gives you an UUID, and based on this UUID, then you can operate on the device, right? And it is also tied up to an extent with the BBSIM, in the sense that it does report the number of ports or SFPs corresponding to the ports that BBSIM is going to report to Volta. So that in that aspect, it is tied. And once it, so if you could scroll down, yeah. So yeah, so there once you do get the inventory. So if you do the get inventory, you get all the components that are there right now, right? And right now it's only one. Okay, for this example, there was one port that was created. So you have one container and a transceiver inside that. And then you could even use the get component API with if you give a correct UUID, and those are the only two present out there right now, you could even retrieve the component. And then we also implemented the one more API, which was the get managed devices. But with the BBSIM, with the DMI being implemented on the BBSIM, in this case, it will always be a single device that would be reported back, which is the OLT. The code changes are not much, pretty trivial. It is, okay, now it is already merged. So, but yeah, you could go through the commit if you would want to, the patch set and the commit, yeah, to see what really went into that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. And that's great, because now we have an upstream open source exemplar implementation. And as I was saying here, for the device management CLI topic that came up last week, I think we can use the actually the gRPC URL that Amit showed here. It does need reflection on the Go side, but it's pretty simple to add to any implementation. So I don't think it's that complicated. And I think that's much better than developing something ourselves. One last topic before we move to the logging is that I know I was shared just today from Uwe from Adtran in particular, the tests that he has written in Robot for the DMI implementation that Adtran has and Holger showcased. And our plan in the upcoming weeks is to introduce such tests in the nightly ONF tests in order for us to check to check the implementation of the interface, and also to create the tests and make sure that they work for whenever a DMI adapter comes into the open source that work on actual devices. We could then be ready to use that those tests with that adapter in the upstream. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll provide some feedback on the tests as soon as I have it. I didn't have the time to take a look at them yet because I was focusing on some other topics for scale and the OpenONU adapter Go. So I have not yet time to take a look at them, but I'll do it in the upcoming days and report back to everybody on how the state of that is. And we could look at integrating them with the nightly tests. Any questions? Okay. Then if not, let's go to the big topic of today that I want to discuss with everybody, which is the logging. So first of all, we actually did merge something related to logs, and that is included in the 09.1 version. And that is an option for configuring the logging endpoint and the protocol. This does not have anything to do with the log level or the components that are logged, but just spews out whatever log there is to a certain component, to a certain endpoint with a certain protocol. Also included here is the Kafka endpoint for the events and the metrics, etc. So this is being merged and has been implemented also by Amit, if I'm not mistaken, the logging output. And I think that's unrelated, but it's just one stepstone. So what is really missing right now is the logging configuration. What is to be logged and at what level? So for that, if you guys remember the old discussion that we had some months back, I had to get feedback from the operators around what was their requirement around what do they want the logs to be for the OLT and their desired and each different component. So my request was, what type of abstraction would you guys like to have on top of the device manager to manage different logs on the OLTs? And as you remember, the options were basically complete abstraction, no abstraction at all, or a middle ground. What the operators chose was the complete abstraction, meaning that what they would like, and what I would like to discuss with you if it would that be possible, is just a set log API with a certain enumeration level, meaning info, warn, debug, trace, for example, and certain components. What these components are is, for example, the operating system, let's say ONL, the pawn management, let's say OpenOLT, and any other alarm manager or something like that within the box. This is the most abstracted thing that we could have. What this does not include, it does not include a live capability to understand what are the loggable components and the loggable levels for each component within the device. That does complicate things a lot, and the complication is what the operators wanted to avoid. So I would like to hear everybody's opinion on if this is enough, if you think this is not the right way to go, or any thoughts that you might want to have on this. Because if we agree that this is the API that we want to go with, that is going to be implemented into the device management interface, and that is what the NEM will invoke. It's actually in here, it's actually missing an element, which is the device ID. Which is, well,
do we expect to be able to set logs across device IDs or based on some selection mechanism? So all devices of type X or something of that nature?
We could do that. We could do a set of UUIDs. That's definitely something that we could do. We could also do something like type, which is like OLT, for example.
Well, if we can query by type and then use set UI,
makes sense, yeah.
UU itself. Do we expect to have a capability to query the number of the components, or did I miss that?
So that is the big question. Because the thing is that if we do the capability to query the components, we could do that. And that's not like terribly complicated to do. The issue is that this now becomes basically, instead of an enumeration of components, it becomes a component object. More of a actually more than a component, it's actually a package. I would say package is a better definition. Package / component at that point. A component there, but that is the middle ground that I was talking about. The operators, I think, would prefer not to have that because that simplifies NEM a lot. But that is what I'm open to discuss. If we say that is the best option because the vendors can achieve a much better support and it can provide a much better logging from the devices and it provides a much better insight in what's going on, I think we can push the operators to have this two set of APIs, get to the components and set this log for this component. What are everybody's thoughts?
My only concern about the enum is you've limited the set, and any time you want to add a new component or a vendor chooses to wants to add a new component outside the norm, it's not really possible, right? It's a proto change.
Yes, that is the downside of having an enumeration. Yes.
Well, for the component numbers, when you do an inventory, through the DMI, you get various components listed there, and don't they have an ID? Would organizing the components you do logging for somewhat be equivalent to components found during the device inventory? I mean, some components don't make any sense, but of course, if you have logging for a transceiver.
Yeah, see, I would think you're going to set the log, and much like you have a set of UUIDs for devices, you're going to have a set of, whether they're UUIDs or component names or whatever, it's also a set, right? I'm setting, on this device, I'm setting the log level for these packages, components, whatever you want to say. So that's going to be a set as well. You're probably also going to want a wildcard, which basically says, hey, I want to set everything on this device to back to warning or back to debug, kind of a clear mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely something we want. Independently of either we go for the enum or the other, we just want this. And this is wildcard. This is definitely an option. It's just I wonder how wild we can get, because if you ask for, okay, how many packages can you set the log for? I can get 150 packages. Does the operator really need to know about those 150? I don't know. I personally don't know. And I'd like to hear what was done in the past with existing systems, I guess, and existing boxes.
I mean, when we were doing logging and basing it on back in Java days, basing it on Java package, I think there was too fine a granularity. They want, I don't know if they want, because I didn't talk to them. I'm assuming they want larger grain. And so it's going to be things like, I want to turn debugging on the packet processing system. I want to turn debugging on, I don't know, whatever, right? Something higher level than every code level package.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have actually maybe a screen snapshot of like a device inventory that's gathered from the DMI, because it has a root device, and then underneath, which is of course the device, and then under there you have fans, and of course fans would have multiple ones, and that seems awful like the hierarchical logging that both Golang and Python often do, because you have a root device where you could turn it to info or debug. That's the simplest, but then you could go down to a subdirectory or a package and say, turn only that one and everybody below it. So if we had like a picture of what a device may look like in a tree view picture, that might help us think on how to apply logging. Does that make any sense? Or
the thing is that I'm not sure we're gonna want to apply logging to the components we get from the inventory API you mentioned. Here, I'm more thinking about adding another API to retrieve the loggable elements. I'm not gonna call them components, because component is now, it's the term for the object in our protobufs. So I'm just gonna call them packages, elements, or whatever. And it can definitely be that you can set the log on the package for the fans, for example, if you're really interested in that. But there's not a one-to-one mapping between the hardware inventory that we get from the get components API and whatever this get loggable packages is. I'm just going to throw a name there that maybe simplifies. Does that make sense? Olger, I'd like to understand also your point of view, because I remember that when we discussed back in the day, a while ago, one of the topics was that you guys, for example, have a very fine-grained logging capability in your OLTs, and that would not be exposed if we go with this particular very high-level API. Does that still hold true?
Yes, yeah. So this would mean that for specific cases, you would have to use other means to configure logging on the device then. It is really needed. I mean, you have a crash every 2 weeks and you know that the crash is somewhere there and you want to only enable logging for that specific area, then there might be other means then used to configure it.
Does it become a best practice, so saying, look, here are the high level components that we expect every device to implement, but yeah, any given device might also have finer grained components if they want to. And so that enum that we talked about in components, does that really just become, here's a list of things that we expect everyone to implement at that level? But then to Holger's point of view, if we need more detail, by all means, a device can have that detail and make that detail available through the same API.
Yeah, this sounds very good to me, because I think we will need more fine-grained access to these, because the amount of logs can be really huge, and so we have to find a sweet spot for seeing what we want to see, but not overwhelming the logging system, especially if everything is pushed to a remote system. So this would mean we would have these components, and in addition we would have a different API, or is it I don't know, an vendor-specific component, and then just a additional string which can specify something, or?
Well,
No.
I would do them all as strings, or all, maybe it's just a documented or required list of components or log groups that must be implemented by devices. So it's kind of a implemented standard type of thing. And then beyond that, a device could have additional ones. So it'd be the same API in my mind for both the standard groupings as well as the any additional groupings that the device wants to do. And we would want to be able to query those groupings from the device itself, whether that's through the inventory, as mentioned earlier, or another query to say, get me the log groupings. That's open for debate, I guess.
Yeah, this sounds very good to me. And I'm also thinking about if it's really component we're talking about, or are we more talking, I mean, David, what you said before, this sounded more like we're interested in not really a component, but about, I don't know, functionality. I don't know, we're interested in management operation or in traffic, in whatever.
I just
really
remember,
yeah.
I just remember from early days, particularly when we were doing logging all per code level, code package level granularity, right? What you end up doing is getting logging that's really focused on what the developer of the code wanted, rather than perhaps someone who's operating it, right? Because if I have to do, again, going back to Java, I'm doing, it's org, open chord, I don't know, it's broken down on how the code's developed, not how the code's used or the product's used. And I'm wondering if it's far better from an operator's point of view to have logging, the granularity of logging based on what they're trying to accomplish or what they're working on.
Yeah, and that is precisely why they want a more high-level API, because I don't believe they care about the different packages that we have within an app or a system or whatever. They want to know about precisely what you were saying before, David, like, give me the information about all the objects that relate to managing the pawn power, for example. I don't care. Just give me everything. And that is why, no, I don't see any other logging API getting implemented other than this. So we agree on one here, and that is the only API we put in. There is no other vendor specific. There is no other back channel. If you want to do it, then it's up to you, and you go directly to the box. We're not going to do anything else here. This is going to be one API, which is going to be the one we are discussing right now. And there's not going to be any vendor specific stuff. That's the whole point. We don't want any vendor specific API here.
Yeah, one of the things, you have the wildcard for all components. We might want to do a suggestion if say a vendor does have something deeper, that if you should probably map that to some higher level generic one that we specify here. So if you set the level of that generic object, say to warning, it makes all vendor specific ones below that go to that level. It should flow down. Is that?
Yeah, that
So-
makes
so- Yeah. For example, if you say you had a high level one just called operating system,
yeah.
and down the vendor did a services and a specific service. So, actually 2 levels below it. If you set operating system to warning, everything below it should go to warning. That way an operator can shut off a debug session that maybe a tech support person did from that vendor.
Yeah. That is what I think would happen whenever somebody implements
Yeah.
this in the device manager. It would map
Yeah.
whatever enum component to whatever thing they want.
Yeah. Yeah, because the vendor specific ones are very, very helpful for, like Holger mentioned, for tracking a really specific issue. But an operator would eventually want to make sure they don't have to open up a ticket just to turn off logging down deep.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Because I do believe that at some point, if you open a ticket, I think already people go down to the box level.
Yeah.
When things break, they're just gonna go and SSH into the box, basically.
But for some boxes, you cannot even SSH to them. So this is why I would think that having the possibility in the device manager still would be nice for me to be able to do whatever I want. So, for example, we are always talking about OLTs, but our DPUs, for example, for G.fast, they don't have an SSH access, so it's simply not allowed to do, and you always have to do netconf, which is painful. And so if you have a device manager, this would be great if the device manager could help you here.
Okay, but let's say we want a more fine-grained set of logging capabilities. What would you have in this list? How long is the Adtran list that you can set there?
I'm not sure, like 20?
That is not that much. And what are those?
I have to check. I think these are basically, we have several processes, and these might be the names of the processes which are running.
Okay.
These processes normally fulfill a certain functionality. So, for example, we have a netcom server, so you could specify a logging level for the netcom server.
But you see there, the problem is that that netcom server is a specific thing that you guys have. It's nothing.
Yeah. I know. But for example, we don't have an OLT agent, so this is also something we don't have. We don't have ONL, so it's.
Well, but you still do have an operating system.
Yeah, we have some. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but not all things will have operating systems. So, our device is a small embedded device, but
to be honest, I'm still in doubt on what needs to be done. I get no answer here.
So Andrea, one question. So instead of having that, when we do this, get loggable packages.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of it returning enums, right? I think you're defining package as an enum, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that at this point, if we do this, this can be just a string.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. My confusion. So yeah. So if we go on the path of this get loggable packages, then what is the problem with that?
The complexity that we have to put into NEM, the complexity that goes to the operator. It's less complexity for us, but the operator needs a lot more in NEM because every vendor he will have to do get loggable components and do a sort of form of I don't know, drop down list in them that he can pick the component and issue the set log level with that component. It's just a lot more complex. Instead, if you have 5, it's just 5 for every vendor.
Again, if we're going to say by standard, there's always going to be these 5. Every device must implement these 5. NEM, if it chooses to only do that 5, it can only do those 5. If, however, a NEM implementation wants to take full advantage of a device and go beyond the standard MIB, if you will, they can query what other MIBs are available. Get the other data. This is something that's relatively common for applications to do. I'm not sure it's that complex, right? It's query a list and populate a menu from a list. Again, it's the implementer's choice if they choose not to do that, and we say by policy or by standard, every device must have these 5. The NEM implementation could stick to those 5 and never do anything else.
And this means you even don't have to poll them, right? Because every device manager has to have these available.
Yeah, and that would be done by certification, right? When we certify a device against this interface, we'd verify that they have those 5.
So maybe I'm missing. What you're suggesting is that we do this, but with the 5 that we expect there to be, something like that.
We do what?
We do the
missing your
get loggable packages, but with an expected return.
Well, because we're saying by certification and by standard, every device will implement 5, and that's just a random number. I don't know what the actual number is. We'll implement some set. So when you call get loggable packages on a device, you will always get those 5, or should always get those 5. There may be additionals as well that a device chooses to implement. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And then if a NEM chooses to dynamically create the logging menu, it can use get log packages to do so. Or if it's going to say, look, I know I'm only working with standard devices and only the standard 5, it could just use a static definition of a menu. Again, that would be the implementation of NEM, their decision.
But this would just be more of a suggestion in the term of API. There is no way we can enforce those, again, 5 random number to be there from an API perspective.
It would be a certification process.
Yeah.
Right?
This works for me. I think it's a good common ground, I guess. Any other thoughts? And this would allow, and I was thinking about Holger's point, this would in theory allow to have those 20 that Adtran has, and also to be capable of, in the future, adding elements to the list without compromising the API and having to reissue the API. Thoughts?
I think this is good.
Okay. Okay, we will still have the need to come up with the list of the expected return ones. That can be a topic. So again, as I was saying, operating system is definitely something. The what I call pawn management, which is in our case the OpenOLT, which manages like the OMC, basically the different indications and ports and things like that. Then there is, I guess, the chipset API. That's something valid. For example, in the case of the OpenOLT is BAL. Or does that fall under the pod management?
I don't know. Part of me says some of this is going to be developed as we actually start debugging devices via the API, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if we're going to be able to a priori know all these things. I mean, if we can look at a survey of existing devices and say these are large groupings that we are large functionality groupings that we can see across devices, then yeah, we could list those.
Okay. Well, then I think we have a good enough quorum to go and implement this on the DMI interface. Amit, do you want to take it on, or should I?
Yeah, you could take that under.
Okay,
If you're loaded, then let me know. Look at it.
that's fine. We can take that offline. Should be not too difficult. Okay. Perfect. So the remaining open questions we have was how to deal with the added components. If we do with the get loggable packages, we're fine. Enable logs for everything. You can do a wildcard. That's what we do here. Just do that. Copy this. Also on them are abilities. This is define which components are needed to be supported. That is something that we do as soon as we start the debugging of things. Yeah, get loggable, query loggable. It's there is no big deal, and the Meta has included this, so this was done. Okay, so I'm basically gonna go ahead and implement this in the interface, and most likely have it up by next week, somewhere around there. Any thoughts, questions before we log off? Anything more we needed to discuss today? No? Then if not, I'll give people 8 minutes back and myself a little break before the next call. And I'll see you guys either next week if we have enough topics, or the week after. I'll see when we can schedule the call. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye. Cheers.
Tuesday.